we turn some of these elements into practical actions? Please present both, well, you, but also some of the techniques that you've been discovering in that work, and how we can also move from, well, a situation without trust to one where trust might appear and where solutions can bloom and blossom.
Thank you, Lars, and thanks to everyone else for your wonderful talks, and thanks for the invitation. I'm going to share my screen real quick. And Vincent, please chime in. We're both here and we can share different perspectives. I'll walk you through some slides very quickly. Can you all see this?
Yes, for sure.
Okay, so just to explain who we are, because I think the context setting is important, as I already put into the chat. We are a nonprofit based in Belgium, but working globally, that specifically came together to be the provider of this safe collective space. Because we see these complex, wicked problems in society getting no resolution, and we feel, like many of you, that the only way to really solve them is if we solve them collectively. And so, as our logo kind of identifies, the way that we think this works the best in our 10 years of experience, this is the evidence that we see every day, is first, there needs to be a coming together around a shared purpose. And once we can come together around a shared purpose, we can collaborate, and we can gain the collective intelligence of the group. These are the things that help us achieve collective action, and it's that action that brings the impactful results. And so this is the flow that we try to nurture in our work. What does our work look like? This is our ecosystem. All the big bubbles are programs, and all the small bubbles are outputs of those programs. And what's important to see here is that those outputs create further outputs, and it creates an entire networked approach. When we talk about trust, and I'll get into that in a moment, it's important to remember that these programs are not programs built by us. We are the collective space, and those programs are actually the collection of stakeholders that come together and co-create that. So the more bubbles that we see, the more we have an actual indicator of the level of trust that is coming and that is leading into new projects and new collaborations as a result of having seeded it to begin with. I would like to use the analogy of a cycling team. Lars and I have spoken at length about this. We've spoken about trust being water. We've spoken about trust being air. Trust is the intangible, invisible glue, as we all know. But the other element that we would like to bring into this conversation is that trust only works in action. It just like a bicycle or a plane, if it's not actually moving, it falls apart. So I'm going to be coming back to this image for the remainder of my slides. The other thing that I want to bring to your attention here is this is our manifesto. You can find it on our website. I don't have the time to go into detail, but this is basically our recipe. We have a lot of homegrown methodologies that we apply. We call it a co-creation staircase. And there's a lot of other things that we can talk about regarding the how we build trust, how we work with trust, and how we translate trust into action. But the manifesto basically gives you an insight into how we do that overall. And what I really want to hone in on are four things. Four things that are sine qua nons for making this invisible force render energy and output and fuel the collaboration and the impact that we need. And those things are neutrality, vulnerability, collectivity, and motion. So what we see as important, as a body that tries to build and work with trust in this middle ground space that brings multiple stakeholders together, which is different from the trust equation that we put into the chat. The trust equation is about creating trust in one person. It is a linear, how do we create trust in patients? How do we create trust in the health system? This is how do we create trust in a live, dynamic, 360, constantly evolving, complex environment. And that is a slightly different and more complicated level. So for us, the neutrality is important, and it means that we are neutral. We are an independent platform whose only stake in the game is that we achieve a societal benefit. But other than that, we are neutral, and everybody that comes to the table have to park their hats. So they have to come with a genuine non-competitive mindset around a shared purpose, co-creating shared common goals. And around this, we build a governance structure, an engagement structure for those programs with equitable voices and shared power. And so that if you're trying to curate this collective space in the health or any other societal issue environment, that is what we understand as neutrality. And it's hugely important to build and to keep trust. The second element is the vulnerability. So, like the cyclists, they're going at very high speed and they're right behind each other. They have to trust that somebody isn't going to have an accident because it's going to make everybody else fall as well. So, they're vulnerable to each other's choices and they're vulnerable to each other's actions. For us, this really requires leaning into a collaborative, non-competitive mindset and working with leaders who quote unquote get it. They lean in with the vulnerability that it may not work out, with the vulnerability that it may fail, but that it's fine to fail forward and to gain learnings, and the vulnerability of judgment from within their own ranks or society that they also have to be comfortable facing and justifying and explaining that the greater outcome is worth the uncomfortable mindset shift that this requires. The third element is collectivity. A lot of you have already mentioned much of this. This is very much coming from the place of interdisciplinarity. None of us have the solutions. Complex problems are complex for a reason. They're multifactorial, and so we need to have the multiple perspectives and angles to understand them, which means that we have to bring in diverse voices and be able to actively and genuinely listen to them and take in and understand the meaning of what they're saying. So this is an entire mindset and posture that we're generally not well equipped with in our educational systems and our general societal pathways. So it requires leaning into a collective way of thinking to gain a collective intelligence, which is what we need to solve the problems. And the last and most important element is the motion part. This is the action part. There is no point in building trust, and that trust will vanish if we don't do anything with it. We have to have outputs. We have to be moving in a direction of common action that is visible, that is tangible, that can be communicated, that can be seen. And so that is, I think, part of the idea that came up earlier around common experiences. You need the common experience of a common task that has a common result. And that is a bit of the battery getting refilled, is that when you see this working, it reinforces your levels of trust. So those are the four elements, and the way that we articulate them in our manifesto is something I've just pulled out. So you've seen our manifesto has 5 points. Each of the 5 points has multiple methodologies associated with it internally, but I'm pulling out these 6 elements, which is the importance of having stakeholder diversity and being able to really hear all the perspectives, because that will give us a richer outcome. The ability to be uncomfortable. We are very uncomfortable at the Synergist. Vincent and I can attest to that. On any given day, we are not in our comfort zones. We have to collectively step out and be willing to be vulnerable together, because that's actually how we learn. When we're comfortable, it's because we already know something. We already understand it. We're not solving anything. Active listening, of course, I've already mentioned, but an important element that we see working very well is that we don't give the answers, even if we think we know what the answer is, even if we think we know what the direction should be. We actually practice more questioning than we do answering. The opposite of a consultation mindset, it is, can we question the group? And the more that we question the group with all of this diversity of perspectives, the richer the question actually becomes. The richer the question becomes, the richer the ultimate output will be. And the collaborative leadership is hugely important. This is what really goes to the heart of trust. The fact that we are non-competitive, the fact that we really believe in positive collaboration reinforces the trust. The fact that we work on shared purpose and common agendas. We don't pursue any singular agenda, and nobody that works with us gets to do that. And our governance makes sure that this happens this way. And finally, back to the motion piece, it's all about navigation. What are we navigating our efforts towards? And that's what ultimately will keep us in this positive trajectory of moving forward rather than eroding backwards. And I believe that that's my last slide, if I'm not mistaken. If you want more information, if you want the manifesto, please scan the QR code. You can find us on LinkedIn or reach out to Vincent or myself. We both work on very different programs, and some of them are completely new. Some of them are flagship and very old and established with very different stakeholders, whether in Europe or globally. So between us, we actually bring a whole variety of perspectives. And I'll stop there to make sure that we have enough time for conversation.
Cool, Amanda. Um, and in this conversation, one of the things, and maybe particularly in relation to the session we just had, I'm also curious if you can these wonderful principles. How do you consider also maybe the element of accounting for them? I mean, is this something that you describe in a kind of a, and pardon the phrase, and maybe I'll be killed by my colleague later. Do you apply sort of a psychotherapeutic approach, figuring out where on the landscape or the compass that you are, or do you set up actual KPIs or systems that would try to assess where where on the bicycle wheel you currently are, or where you should apply more energy, perhaps?
I can give a first answer, and then I would invite Vincent to chime in because I don't want to do all the talking here. So the first thing I want to say is that we are not in the business of creating trust and measuring trust for the sake of it. We are in the business of generating trust to do something with it. And so what we actually measure is what we do. We don't measure the process of doing it. But we do, one of the things that we refer to a lot, and we use the bicycle, which is why I brought the image back, is we use the term lead, engage, manage. And we consider that we lead from behind, because it's not about us, it's about everybody else. But the lead, engage, management is sort of like our three-way step uh, in repetition to make sure that we are still having and keeping our license to operate. And with that, I might invite Vincent to share your views as well, so I'm not the only one speaking.
No, that's fine. Thanks, Amanda, and thanks, Lars, for the question. I think it's really important what Rune said in the beginning about establishing loops and feedback loops, measurements that can showcase that there's trust. As Amanda said, we don't measure trust itself, but one of the key aspects that we do in our day-to-day work whenever we engage with groups and people outside is that we take formalization steps. We make sure that people feel heard, that they see that their contributions have been valued, integrated within the considerations for moving forward, and we make that we make that public to their eyes, so that there can be a measure of or feeling of trust in that the process has been shaped by them, which then gives also a feeling of ownership, of course, which is again important to build that trust that then leads somewhere, as Amanda said. So that would be my addition to that.
For sure. One of the things that we've been conscious of in some other elements about working with trust are elements that we would refer to as unconscious bias, where in the interest of trying to remove the unconscious bias, also try to establish knowledge on things that we actually perhaps do not see, but since we do not see it, we also don't know what it would look like. And to be very practical, for instance, in some of the Danish organizations, that might be questions about gender equity or racism or other elements that we do not see, but maybe we don't see it because we have forgotten what it looks like or similar, but they're very destructive to the work on trust that we are also doing. So if it's really hiding and lurking in the background, it's important that we know that it's there. Yeah, but fascinating. But in the interest of, and especially maybe Rune, he's just shut off his camera, so that might mean that he's also leaving. But referring to what he's doing. But maybe I can sort of open the floor to all of us, and I'm in this case very curious also to ask Felix what you make of this wonderful analogy also of bicycle teams. Is it possible maybe to think more also, if you will, metaphorically, or maybe I'll try. I'm doing my best to add or remove spotlights, but it's not actually all that easy to figure out whose spotlight I should move and whose I should add. But if I remove for all of us, suddenly we should all be there. And now, Felix. So,
yeah, thank you.
Wonderful.
It works. No, I mean, similar to what we discussed before as well. I mean, those metaphors help. I think they are useful at times. And I think when it comes to the analogy of the trust building needs continuous effort, and also that also when we go into more the buildup of trust, it just takes time, and I think all those different metaphors can help to visualize that, and it's just not one-off exercise. I think especially in policy making and governance, we see that while we have legislation periods, we have certain cutoff points, we have certain targets we need to meet, and I think sometimes I think this is also a very calculated approach to trust building, which we see in recent years emerging with checklists, etc. is sometimes not just working well. For many, trust building is not something we calculate. It's an intrinsic feeling as well, and it needs constant effort and also constant resources. I think even to the degree when you are in a high trust society and where you have a stable system where trust is not a topic, it still needs work to maintain that level. So I think those marathon or say cycling analogies absolutely work.
I've used, and that is, of course, neither you, Alejandro, or you, Gitonga. In that sense, of course, we're talking about very technical terms, and sometimes technical terms, a machine can be a metaphor as well. But in this case, of course, what I've also used as a metaphor would be fungi and mycelium, and how trust sometimes can be the mycelium that is extremely tricky to see, but it binds everything together and are able to communicate extremely efficiently over very vast distances, even though we don't actually understand how it does that completely anyway. But are these also to some of your effects, what you've seen, Alejandro and Gitonga, in your work? If you were to describe it, would you think that you were to use a mechanistic metaphor, and would that be less useful or more useful in your context?
Tonga, would you like to go first?
Wonderful.
Just go first.
Okay, I'll try. So something I realized today talking with you all is that actually when we talk about trust is a feeling. So it's actually very difficult to describe in mathematical terms. We are trying. We got our trust equation, which I'm in love with. I'm trying to put this trust function. It's it's difficult to bring it down, and therefore then be able to somehow be able to then say this is a machine or machine-like element. It's not even, we cannot even put it into mathematical terms. And on another side to this conversation, I think there's also an issue with us engineers trying to deal with uncertainty. It's something that we are not comfortable with, and it's definitely something that we need to do. And the closest that, in my experience, happens, or the closest element that and you can see from our systems is the domain that on cybersecurity. And what happens with cybersecurity is that there are so many definitions out there, so many methods, so many, and yet everyone has its own way to deal with how to model, how to make systems secure. And security or cybersecurity shares some properties with trust. In fact, there is definitely some intercommunication there, like mycelium there between cybersecurity and cyber trust. I'm just coining that term. And I feel that in the future, in terms of using or defining trust inside the digital world, we are going to have the same issues as we have with cybersecurity. Everyone will have its own systems where at the end we are going to be able to define minimal aspects of what trust is in different points, and probably not completely. Final thought is I tried to do this exercise several years ago and I forgot about it. One of the big models for cybersecurity is the CIA triad: confidentiality, integrity, and accessibility. Sort of the big cornerstones of what cybersecurity is. I try to do the same exercise for trust, and yeah, it was challenging, but yeah, I tried to. That's why I'm gravitating towards the trust equation that we are providing, because it's sort of near to finding what are the core elements there and what we need to model, right?
So thank you very much, Kitonga.
Yeah, thank you so much. One thing I'll just want to point out is that trust has to be even if you're using like in terms of even AI cannot even tell what is true or not, even AI itself. So there must be a force that is behind that AI and what is driving that AI. And that is what we want to counter, because trust has to start with us to secure our businesses. Having worked in philanthropy, we used to really work with a lot of organizations in Kibera. And at that time, with the supplies that were coming and the beneficiaries, if you compare to the research that was done, whereby there were so many organizations in one area, but if you go to the ground, there's no impact really felt. But in that case, people are still using the back things, like maybe sign a form for me here and just like sign for me a form here and just say you received. How many people can come and sign and they have not received? How many people can come say we have a borehole here where we don't have? And imagine, and now the money has already been like sent out to do that work. So having mechanism in place is right, because even if we cannot really change and make everything trustful, but it can contribute, it can make a difference. It can change something, and that is what we cannot wake up one day and we say that we've like countered every mistrust in every sector. No, but we can put up system, we can use the mechanism, we can use that AI, we can use each and everything together to come up with how we can better the services, how we can better what we have. And that is how I feel like that is the way for building trust. We need to, because for me to be able to tell that you truly know assuming right now we are doing an activity, how will I know that activity happened? It has to be somebody who was there or somebody who knows about it. Like it comes through a chain of how things are flowing. And that's why I was able to point out that some people can be fraudulent, but not everybody can be fraudulent. And that is why we need system, that is why we need mechanism, because we cannot continue with the way we used to do things back then, because things are changing. AI is changing things. The world is moving so fast. So we need to move with it to better the services and the AI and use everything possible to put trust in place. Because if we don't put trust, we are going to lose a lot of things. We are going to lose jobs, we are going to lose businesses, and we are going to really, really go through a lot of phases. Thank you.
For sure. Thank you so much, Gitonga.
Thank you.
Asked Alejandro, but and of course we're running out of time. Perhaps I would ask very in a sentence, no more than a sentence, and maybe even a word, Amanda and Vincent, what you found, and Felix ending up, and maybe with Nina at the end, what you learned today, or what you found to be interesting. And then we can start with Amanda, Felix, Vincent. Like maybe it's not entirely alphabetical order, but it's close.
Well, I was going to offer Vincent the floor first, actually.
Okay. Yeah, but Vincent, then.
Sure. So what I was really getting into my thoughts around the metaphors, and I would just want to say that, for me, like metaphors are something that connect topics and meanings, and they give a certain sense to it, and that is what is memorable. And so if the topic and the meaning are positive for someone, and they experience out of that interaction something that they call trust, then in the end, if there is a metaphor attached to it, it will reinforce that trust and accelerate trust building with that person.
Power to metaphors. Thank you, Vincent. Love it.
I can add to that. I really think that what has gravitated to the surface of this conversation is something that I think, and Runa has left now, the element that we talk a lot about trust individually and within teams and within organizations and even within networks, but we're missing the cross-sectoral part. And that's the part that's really important. And the other thing is I hugely valued everything that Gitonga brought in on AI, because it's true in a world of fake news and in a world of, we're swinging right and we're leaning back towards, are we actually going to go to war over things that are lies because they're so well narrated and disseminated by things that may in fact not be human, and we're all believing it. So that the power of storytelling when it's unverified is, I think we're all really feeling that, and within the sphere of health, what Gitonga brings is hugely needed, and we need more of it.
So a similar final word from you, Felix, before we end.
Yeah, thank you very much. No, I think it was an interesting conversation also to listen to all of you and to see that on the one hand we, in the spectrum of research, we do more the conceptual work and thinking here to try to understand what those are or what trust building is, and then we see also the application in the field and different ways to build trust in practice. And I think it's very nice to have those exchanges to see that on both ends work is done. Thanks.
Thank you. So thank you very much, everyone, for coming today and for sharing your thoughts. Specifically, I can advise both Alejandro, Gitonga, and both you, Amanda and Vincent, to check out the call that Felix has made the other day for research into this. There's a wonderful book, and you might fit within the book. So, of course, we also need someone to read the book at some point, but it has to be written first. So thank you so much, everyone, for coming. We can share the link for that, and of course, any other information from you about that, Felix, we'll be happy to do that as well. But thank you so much, and look forward to see you in some other physical or online space soon again. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.